Generally, when I do these videos, I'm answering a question. But in this case, I recently had an experience that I'd like to share with you that I think is one of the most important selling lessons and marketing lessons. And if you can absorb this, and I'm going to tell the story to you, if you can absorb it and apply it and look for these instances in your world and then apply them to your selling process and your marketing process, it will make you infinitely more successful. Now, this is something I already know. This is something that I've practiced many, many times, but I'll admit it's also something that I've somewhat gotten away from, or when I'm trying to maybe sell something or get a marketing piece out quickly, I neglect to do what I'm about to tell you. But when you do what I'm about to explain, everything works so much better and you have so much more success. So I need you to imagine, so I can paint this picture for you, I need you to imagine that you're buying a home, buying a property. So if you've ever bought a property or you've ever looked at properties thinking you were going to buy, if you can imagine the experience, and more than likely if you've bought something in the last many years, you found it on realtor.com or Redfin or some website, and you look at the pictures and you think this looks good, this has potential, and then you make a judgment the moment you open that front door and you walk through the door, you make a judgment about the property. Like you get a subconscious first 10-second initial feel. You walk in and you think, oh yeah, this is it. Or you walk in and you're like, this is okay, I'll keep looking. Or you walk in and you're like, this is not it. I mean, you're gonna have one of those three experiences. And it happens like that as soon as you walk in. That's really important to know because that's how we make hiring decisions in life. That's how we buy things in life. Generally, we make our decision in the first few seconds, and then we find reasons and facts and data to justify that thing that we wanted to do from a selling standpoint. Like I won't even go that direction, but just go with me on that one. Just buy into that concept. So now put yourself in a place, you're buying a property. So my wife and I and our oldest son, our youngest son doesn't want to have anything to do with this process. We've looked at 4 properties in the last 2 weeks. And this past Sunday, we looked at 3 properties. The very first property we looked at, we were like, this is it. Like, this is it. Then the next 3 properties we looked at, we really like them. But the first one was great. I'll explain some details here in a moment, but the first one only met our criteria because of balconies. Doesn't really matter, but there's a few other things about it that we really liked, but it wasn't perfect. The second property, great place, without question. As soon as we walk in the door, the reaction is, this is a cool place. Like, I like it, but it's not a reaction of like, oh, this is it. So you have to know that balconies are incredibly important. This is a downtown property. Balconies are incredibly important to us. And so this property has a lot of balconies, but it didn't have exactly what we were looking for. And you could see it the moment you walk in because the whole back of the building is glass. And you're like, so the feeling you have is, this is cool. The decorations of the place, like the way they designed it and the interior, immediately you think this is cool, but just based on what we want, there wasn't that reaction of like, oh my gosh, this is it. It was like, this is cool. It's definitely a property that I want to look around just to see what the options are, but it's not the property. That's the reaction. And so it's really important that you understand that was the feeling. I had it, my wife had it. We didn't verbally say it, but that's what we both were feeling. We were going to look at the property, make a tour once or twice, and leave. So the agent was there before us, and when we walked in, it just so happened that the owner was there, or we assumed it was the owner. This is insane because there was a picture in the place of a guy standing in front of a Ferrari 458. So it wasn't like a picture, it was a painting. And there's the guy in the kitchen. So we knew the owner was in the property, but didn't say a word to us. He's kind of just staying away from us, moving around. But the agent is going to show us the property. And so, and again, stick with me, this is gonna be a little bit longer. There's a really good point. At least it's a profound point for me, so I think it'll be good for you. So the agent's showing us around. He's like, hey, here's the living room, here's the balcony, here's the view. Hey, come with me. Here's the master suite. Here's the bathroom area. It's got this, this, and this. He's sort of like running through the checklist of things that a property of this type would have that are important to somebody that's buying it. And he's showing us around rather quickly. And it's as though in his mind, he's got a checklist. the kitchen matters, these appliances matter, the balconies matter, this certain, different things matter. The master suite matters, the view from the master suite. And he's just like, hey, look at the view from the master suite, check. Hey, look at this master bathroom. You can walk into the shower, it's got all this stuff, check. And he's just moving us through the property. And so he continued our feeling of, okay, this is a nice property. And then, I don't know how it happened exactly. Oh, I asked how many parking spaces the building had. How many parking spaces could I get? Because that's like the most important thing to me. And it was only 2, which is a problem. And so the owner then steps in and says, well, how many do you need? And so I told him how many I need. He's like, oh, well, I don't know that that's even possible. And so it starts a dialogue. And this is the part that's really important to understand, and the reason I'm telling this story. So the owner he starts talking about the property, and he says, well, have you noticed my cabinets? And so the cabinets go all the way to the ceiling, and they're super nice. I mean, no doubt about it. And so he starts talking about the cabinets. He starts talking about the storage in the cabinets, and then he talks about the backsplash. So we're standing in the kitchen at this moment. And he tells us that this is the 7th backsplash. He's had 6 prior backsplashes, had them all torn down, and this is the 7th. And it's pretty interesting. I mean, it's very unique. And he tells us the story of that and how the contractors were frustrated. And then he shows us in the living room how he has this floor-to-ceiling backlit cabinets and built-in entertainment system. And he then tells some stories around that. And then he shows us the security system. He travels a lot, and the security system automatically kicks in when somebody shows up at the property, and there's different codes for the maid service, because this is in a hotel. And so there's different codes for the maid service. If he needs to send somebody up to the property, the security system can do all these things. He tells us stories about when I'm traveling and the security, and these are the things you want to look for in a property, and how all the blinds in the place lower and raise based on certain times of day and the amount of light being detected in the property. And we've always thought we want to be up on like the 20th or 30th floor. And then this is on the 14th floor. And so then he tells us, hey, step back here and look at me, because look with me because it's completely surrounded by buildings. It's like the skyline. And he says, notice how every building, you can see the top of every single building in Dallas. And so what happens is you're surrounded by buildings at night. It's one of the best views in Dallas. And he knew of another property that we looked at. He's like, yeah, you could be up on the 28th floor in that building, but what then happens is you're looking down and you're not surrounded. You're looking at the tops of buildings. But in my building, in my space that I carefully picked, that I put down the deposit on when this building was being built in 07, I specifically picked a building so that it was like a picture frame around me, and I could see the top of every building, and I was framed in lights. And he told the story of that. And then he told the story of going from the living room to the master suite, and how this door that he had to have it custom built, and it cost $18,000 so that it would fit around a column, and so that the glass wouldn't be too transparent, so that you wouldn't accidentally walk into it, or a guest, or if you're having a party, wouldn't walk into it at night. But at the same time, it needed to be perfect glass so that when it was closed, only a very small little part at the bottom would lock that door so that nobody could enter it. And then he told a story around, if you have someone over and there's maybe someone in the bedroom and they're not feeling very well, maybe they're ill, and you don't want your guests going in there, you could lock the door. And he went through story after story about the property, and I could go on, and none of that matters. But as he told the stories, our feeling on this property totally changed. When we walked in the property, we thought, most of the 60 or 70 units in this building that you can buy are probably very similar to this. And then after telling the story, we realized that none of the units in the building are like this. Like, this is the only one you can get like this. It took 3 years to build the interior. You can't get another property like this. And, the story of the door, the story of the skyline, it changed my opinion. And it was all based on stories. And that's my point. And that's why I gave you so much detail on this. The first agent had a checklist. He was selling based on what's most important. Master bathroom, kitchen. He was going down that checklist of what is important to a buyer. And then based on the price point of the property, what are the important factors to somebody that's buying a property of this type? And he covered those. He did an adequate job selling. He covered all the bases. But that's all he did. He only covered the bases. The other guy, the owner, he told a story, and he told a story about like almost things that are insignificant. A door, an $18,000 door separating the living room from the master suite. He turned that into an entire story, probably 4 minutes, and I remember it. I can recite it to you. He then, as I gave you some of the examples of the stories. The skyline was one of the biggest revelations to me, because I've always wanted to be up as high as I could get. And he turned it into a story about entertaining and such. And it totally, as I said, transformed the way we looked at the property. A little later he found out that, back to the parking garage. I asked a question about the parking garage. He's like, no problem, come down, come down to the parking garage. So we go down to the parking garage. He's like, okay, so I was one of the very first people to put money down on this parking on the condo. So I have first dibs on parking spaces. And here's the 2 parking spaces you should have had. And they're like right when you come in, they're super convenient. He's like, but here's why. He has multiple Ferraris and some other cars. And he's like, here's why I don't want my Ferraris parked here. Because valets coming in and out, sometimes in a hurry, and you have tons of guests that there's a lot of entertaining in this building, so lots of cars are coming through. So I moved my parking spaces over here. And notice how they're protected. Notice how nobody can get to them. And so I know that my Ferraris are safe. I know that all my cars are safe. And so he tells a whole story about that. And think about that when you're selling something. Like he didn't even need to tell me that. He didn't need to tell me about the other spots that he didn't take. All he needed to do was tell me about the spots that he did take. But the story about the care that went into it, the thought of it went into it, the reason why I want to be there, and why his place is the perfect place. When we're selling tree work, when we're selling lawn care work, when we're selling landscape, there's a story for everything. No matter what you're selling, there's more to it than I can just mow your lawn. And I will close your gates, and I will do a good job training my people. There's even more that can be told. When you're installing a landscape, of all things, you can really tell a story around that. What is the experience going to be that they feel? What is going to be, what are the differences in the environment going to be when they're entertaining? What experiences will they have when they have family members over? Take it a step further. What is the care that goes into selecting their plants? They're hand selecting their plants and picking them out and considering factors like what will the plants be like in 5 years and 10 years? And these are things that many of us already do. But what are the stories that can be wrapped around this stuff where now you're painting a picture in a person's mind? That's what happened to us. Now, this isn't the property for us. We're not going to buy it, but I will tell you that when we walked away, we felt totally different about that property. So maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, when we first saw it, and from a present standpoint, awesome. But from matching some of the criteria that we wanted and being located where we wanted it, it was maybe a 5. And when we left, it was probably an 8.5, if not a 9. But because of the location, that would be the only factor that would really kill the deal. Is it where it's located? It's way too noisy when there's sporting events and things like that. And so it's not a fit for us. But that was really the deal killer. The presentation, had everything else been right, would have probably sold us on the property. So I hope that I've painted a picture. I gave you a lot of detail, and I did it so that I could paint a picture and give you some examples of story. How can you craft stories around what you're selling? How can you craft stories around the experiences of what somebody's going to feel? How can you craft stories about the effort that goes into delivering to them what they're receiving? The effort that goes into selecting the plants and the trees and caring for those trees. There are stories for everything. And I'll tell you, I've done it and I've had success with it, but it takes more work. It takes more thought. When you're writing marketing, it takes more effort. It takes longer to create that piece. And so it's very easy for us to quickly get a piece out, quickly try to close that sale, when if we just slow down a little bit and put a little bit more effort into it, might our closing percentages, might our conversion rates go way up. Stories sell. I've heard a saying once, facts tell, stories sell. Very, very good lesson. I hope it resonated with you.